So if you're finding it difficult to manage your remote team right now, and maybe even you find yourself every once in a while wondering if your team member is actually doing the work they say they're doing, then know that this video is for you, because I'm going to be talking about some common remote team management challenges, as well as some tips so that you can better manage your remote team. And so if that sounds like something that you want to learn more about, then definitely hit on the subscribe as well as a like button, and let's get started. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new around here, well, my name is Mac, and I'm a leadership coach, but I actually work specifically with first-time team managers and helping them become effective leaders. And so if that's you and you're a high achiever and you're new to people management, but you want to develop the leadership skills required in order to feel confident in your role, as well as so that you can create a cohesive, positive, high-performance culture, then I highly suggest you check out the link in the description box below so that you can book a call with me to learn more about my signature program, the New Manager Accelerator, where I help managers just like you achieve those exact outcomes. All right, so like I said, today we're talking about remote team management, and this has been a topic I've been meaning to do for some time, especially since a lot of you have reached out with numerous questions on this. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to put together all the questions and kind of like all the challenges that you guys have reached out about and talk about those challenges, as well as kind of like what you can do to navigate it. So the first challenge that seems to come up quite a bit is just that, you guys are saying that you are fighting this urge to micromanage. Now, I will say that I think the remote environment kind of lends to having this tendency of wanting to micromanage, because the truth is you can't really see what your team member is actually doing, right? I know for myself, there was a period for my department where I actually was working from home a couple of days a week, like way back. And I did that because I wanted to get like super focused on the strategy for the next quarter. And I really just could not be interrupted by, other departments and whatnot. So I decided I would work from home. And I do remember like during that season when I did that I would actually find myself wondering every once in a while what my team members were doing. And I really had to check myself on that, because it was like, why are you wondering what they're doing? I mean, they have never given you a reason to doubt them, especially where they're at right now. They are completely kicking butt. Like, why are you wondering if they're doing what they say they're doing? Just like focus on what you have to do. Like, the reason why you decided to work from home is so that you can focus. So stop worrying about stuff that doesn't matter and focus. So I want to say this, I want to ask you the same question. Like, why do you feel this way? I guess is the question. Like, what is it that you need to see from your team members that you're not currently seeing that's making you feel like you have to check in or check up? And not in a good way. I mean, in a micromanaging way, right? Like, what's making you feel that way? The question that I often ask my accelerator students when this topic comes up is like, what are you more interested in? Are you interested in activity, or are you interested in outcomes? And normally they'll say like, well, Mac, of course I'm interested in outcomes. And I'm like, but your actions aren't aligned with that. So if you're actually interested in the outcomes and people are hitting those outcomes, then does it matter if they sign off a little bit early to like pick up their kids? Does it matter if the green light's not on their Slack all day? Like, does it matter? If they're hitting the goals, which you say is the most important thing, then it shouldn't matter if they have a little bit of flexibility in the time frame that they're there, right? Because they're hitting the expectations, and that's what's important to you. So I want to challenge you, if you're like having that struggle yourself, where you're wondering like, why is this person not on for 8 hours of the day? I want to ask you, are they hitting the outcomes? Because if they are, then please let go. Let go of those thoughts and trust them, because they're clearly hitting the results. Now, let's talk about what you do if the person you're concerned about is actually not hitting the outcomes, right? So they're not hitting those results and you're concerned about them, or you feel like they're struggling. Like, should you still micromanage them? The way I see it is no. I want to strongly caution you against micromanagement, because honestly speaking, there are several steps beforehand that you've already skipped. Because here's the thing you need to know, and I tell my people this all the time. Every single disappointment you have in your team members is due to a failure to meet expectations. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Every disappointment you will probably ever have in your team members is always at the root due to a failure in them meeting expectations. And so if you are disappointed with something that your team member is doing, or if you're concerned, then what you have to do is unravel and go back to the expectations. You have to ask yourself first, have I set clear expectations? Does this person know exactly what winning looks like in their role? Do they know exactly what success looks like in their role? Do they know the KPIs, the OKRs, whatever the metrics are that you're using to evaluate the performance? Do they know that? Do they have the training that they need in order to hit those performance goals or those outcomes? Do they have the coaching? Like, are you providing in between coaching to them to make sure they can hit those outcomes? Do they not have the competencies required to do the role properly? And maybe that's why they're failing to meet expectations. Like, there's so many questions that you have to ask yourself before you jump to creating, honestly, toxicity and just wasting your time micromanaging. Now, I did do a video about this months ago with regards to underlying causes for performance issues, which, I will link for you here as well as in the description box below. But it's actually really important for you to stop and reflect first before you shoot from the hip, because if you react, then you might be reacting to the wrong thing and nothing is solved, right? And so I want you to really pause, ask yourself those questions, starting with the expectations, and then, enter into a conversation, then act. That way you're inviting into the conversation empathy, specifics, and as well as details, so that things are moving forward rather than reacting in a very emotional manner, which a lot of people do out of frustration. And as a side note, when it comes to having these performance conversations, when it is remote team management, make sure that you're not having these conversations via messenger or email. I've seen people do this and it does not go well. These conversations should be done in person so that you can see body language and read their reaction so that you can adjust and, communicate more effectively. So just make sure that any performance conversation that you're having with your team is not done, indirectly by means of a computer. Also, another side note on this topic, which I'm realizing I have a lot more to say on this topic than I originally thought I did, but in terms of the conversation, the performance feedback conversation, I think it's also important to, ask a couple of deep dive questions around remote work itself. Because the truth of the matter is there is still friction that is, that exists in remote work. Just because people have been doing it now for a year and change, it doesn't mean that they're comfortable in it, right? They're still trying to figure it out because the lines of home and work are a little bit blurred right now for a lot of people, and they're still trying to work themselves through it. So I would ask these 3 questions just to, like I said, dive a little bit deeper. So the first question you want to ask is, how is the remote work environment affecting you? Like, do you find that it's hurting or helping you to make progress? You also want to ask them, is there anything in your work where you feel like you're not being set up for success in any way? And then lastly, is there anything that you're being asked to do that you just don't think is realistic? And if so, where could we make adjustments so that it's more realistic? These are the questions you want to ask so that people kind of feel like, okay, my boss, my manager, I should say, understands that this remote working environment, while it's providing flexibility, is not something that is my strong suit right now, and I need a little bit help. I need a little bit of help getting through it. So, like I said, besides addressing the specific issue or where the expectations aren't being met, also ask them about how they're doing with trying to get to that outcome while trying to do so remotely. So the second challenge that a lot of managers face in kind of a remote working environment where everybody is dispersed is just trying to build connectivity and engagement. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing an executive leadership training with some executives, and the CFO of the company, she literally in the middle of the workshop, she put her head down and she was like, it's so frustrating. She says, it's so frustrating trying to lead in an environment like this because I want everyone to feel a sense of togetherness, but I don't want to come off as cheesy, but I still also want them to know that I care and that I'm here. Now, I can definitely understand her frustration, and maybe you feel the same way as well. It can definitely feel a little bit awkward remotely trying to kind of get everybody together and to feel kind of the sense of cohesiveness. But is it not worth it? Like, I always talk to you guys about when I say, is it not worth it? Is the cheesiness, a little bit of awkwardness and cheesiness, is that not worth it? Because I always talk to you guys about the fact that, risk analysis is really important whenever you're putting yourself out there in any way that feels a little bit risky. So you want to consider in this risk analysis process, what the upside is, what the downside is, and if you can live with the downside. So to me, the upside of being a little bit awkward is that you have a team that gels. The downside is you come off a little bit cheesy, but I kind of feel like you can live with that downside in order to have the upside. You know what I mean? And that upside, like I said, is far greater and has so many great results. So I'm okay being a little bit uncomfortable and doing things that feel a little bit weird in order to make sure that my team does feel connected and that everybody is gelling and working well together. Now, in a more practical sense, don't allow being in a remote environment to kill your routines. Think about the things that you would have done if you were in the office and try to do the same thing remotely. So, for example, if you were to come in the morning to the office, what's one of the first things you would do? You would most likely walk past your team, say hello, say good morning, ask them how they're doing, and keep moving. Well, why can't we do that in a remote environment? If you have, let's say if you're using Slack, that's your main mode of communication, then you can have a general channel. And one of the first things that you do in the morning is do the exact same thing. Say, hey, good morning, guys. I just want to let you know I'm here. Hope everyone's doing well. Let me know if you need anything. It's small, but it works because it just gets everybody in the same kind of frame of mind, feeling kind of like they're in the office, even though they're doing things on their own. The other thing you want to be mindful of is just being consistent. It's so easy for the things that used to be on your schedule on the regular to fall through the cracks when you're working remotely. So make sure the pillars are consistent. One of the pillars, your one-on-ones. Make sure that you are making time for that consistently in your schedule so that you can make room for removing obstacles for your team, for checking in terms of how they're feeling, how they're doing, and aligning and clarifying expectations. And then make time for your team meetings so that you can answer any questions, disseminate communication, and make sure everybody knows where they stand. These are core pillars that you have to be doing on a consistent basis so that you maintain the connectivity as well as that feeling of gelling within the team. The other challenge that you might face in a remote working environment is communication. Even more so, I think, than in person. I mean, communication in general is really difficult, but there's just so many extra layers of complexity that goes into remote work that it creates more friction around communication. For one, it can feel like you're in meetings literally all day, like your entire day is being overtaken by meeting with people. Whereas it just doesn't feel that way sometimes when you're working in person. And, we've all seen those memes of employees poking fun of their managers for having a meeting, for something that, could have been an email or a memo or something. And so it's clear that everyone's kind of feeling a little bit burdened or heavy around communication. And of course, I know you want to make sure that your communication is effective. So here's what I'll say when it comes to having really clear communication with your team members. So I think the first thing you have to do to ensure that your communication is hitting that mark is to really set up some guidelines for yourself around communication and the different forms. So write down, take out a piece of paper and write down all the different forms of communication that you're typically involved in. So whether that's updates, memos, urgent FYIs, giving project updates, receiving project updates, having open discussion or brainstorming sessions. Write down absolutely everything, and then based on the urgency of those different buckets, then decide for yourself what mode you're going to use to communicate that specific thing. So for example, if you might decide that updating on projects, you can open up a Trello board and have people update you on Trello about their projects and where they're at. You might decide for urgent FYIs that you might send it through email because people are always on their email. For general just updates, you might decide that you want to send that in MS Teams or Slack or whatever. You just have to think about what the outcome is of the message that you're trying to send or what you want that person to do with that message, and then think of the right mode to send it through. You know what I mean? So, but it actually first has to start with you just like jotting out every single piece of communication that you typically have, and then deciding which form or mode it should go to. And then after you come up with that, you want to run it past your team to see if it makes sense to them. And if it does, then it becomes an official communication guide for the entire team to follow in terms of making sure that you guys are actually communicating in an effective way together. Now, of course, if remote team management has been a struggle for you and you really want a deep dive and a practical, comprehensive approach to managing your team more effectively, then I highly suggest that you check out the details of the New Manager Accelerator program, which is my signature program for new managers. And I'll actually put the link in the description box below so that you can book a call with me and we can discuss, some of your challenges as well as goals and whether or not the accelerator would be a great fit in accelerating your development. All right, so like I said, I will put that in the description box below. I am so happy to be back with you guys again here on YouTube, and I hope that you found this video valuable. And if you did, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on any other content that I share on this platform every single Tuesday. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Do not forget to keep smiling, and I'll see you in the next one.